school here at the University of Victoria. So I work with our employers who hire our business students. Our business students do 3 mandatory co-ops as part of their program. So in order to graduate, they need to secure 3 co-ops, and which develops their professional skills and bring a lot of value to our employers. So they're quite active in co-ops and internships. I will turn it over to Morgan for her introduction before we kick things off.
Hi, my name is Morgan Filliol. I am also an employment development officer for engineering and computer sciences. I am Tara's counterpart. So I manage the region, which is Eastern Canada, which is Quebec, Ontario, the Prairies, and Alberta. And we're very excited to present today.
Great. And it's my pleasure to introduce our special guest, Dave Murray from ICTC. He's joining us from Calgary today. So Dave, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Tara. I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to supporting the discussion today and seeing what we can do to widen the awareness, not just of hiring students, but how to get free money to help support hiring more students. And that's where we fit in. We are one of, I think it's 18 student work placement program providers, SWPP. Is the acronym across Canada, and I'll be talking a bit about how we provide funding services and how we fit in with amongst those other service providers as well.
Excellent. Thanks, Dave. So to start off, we were wondering how many of those present have actually hired a co-op student before. If you wouldn't mind putting that information in the chat, that would be really helpful for us. So we know who is here today. If you could do that, we'll just pause for a moment to see who has hired a co-op student before, just so we know who's in the audience. And if you haven't hired a co-op student, maybe let us know if you are thinking about hiring a co-op student. Very good. Thanks, Jordan. And Slavka, great, thank you. All right, so moving on then, thanks and keep, oh there, hi Olive, thanks for that. Very good. Oh yes, thanks Kevin. Yes, I thought I recognized your name. Harmac's been a wonderful supporter of the co-op program. And thanks Jimmy. Excellent. Okay, so moving forward onto our agenda. Oops, I seem to, every once in a while, Zoom likes to stick. Let me just see if I can move this. There we go. So this is actually a photo of a mechanical engineering technology student from Camosun. So hello and welcome everybody to our session. Our goal is to help you leverage wage subsidies to hire co-op students. We're going to provide you with an overview of the process of hiring a co-op student. For those of you who are already hiring students, this will be something that you already know, but for those who are on the call who this is new to them, hopefully this will be helpful information. And then we're going to cover 2 different funding programs that are available for employers. We're going to also explore the range of co-op students who are available, like so perhaps you hire engineering students, but didn't know that you could also hire a business student in your company. And then as Karima mentioned, we are going to leave time at the end for questions. You're also welcome to put questions in the chat for us.
Thank you. I'll start things off by letting you know that UVic has co-op students in more than 220 academic programs. Co-op is mandatory in some programs, like I mentioned, for business and also engineering students at UVic. And students from nearly all programs can participate across campus, and they are available to you. Here's why we think co-op could be a great fit for you. Students are enthusiastic, they're professional, they're productive, and they bring fresh energy. Hiring a student can provide flexible short-term help for a project or a busy season, and you'll also source some great talent before they graduate, so you get a first crack at the students before they graduate. Here's a brief background of the co-op program and requirements, which will help gauge if co-op is right for you. Co-op programs across Canada are accredited through CWIL, which is Cooperative Education and Work Integrated Learning Canada. These national guidelines ensure a beneficial and fair process for employers, for students, and schools. Students are available in the fall term, the spring and winter term, and summer term. Work terms are usually 4 months in length, and students need to work full-time for a minimum of 12 weeks or 420 hours during that term. Multiple terms are also available in some cases, 8 months, 12, and even up to 16 months. So if you have a larger project, something that takes a longer time, please explore these options with us, as student availability will depend on their program. Work terms must be paid a fair market wage. Salaries range by the position, such as entry level versus a senior position, and student programs. Wage is something that you determine as an employer, and you're welcome to discuss the salaries with us. We have information on average salaries to help you determine what would be a competitive wage to attract student interest. And finally, a work term requires supervision. Students are also asked to set learning objectives and complete midterm and final assessments on how they're doing against those objectives. Supervisors also give their feedback. Halfway through the work term, we will complete a work site visit with you and the student just to share the experience, the progress, and see how things are going. Most students also create a final assignment for their co-op program at the end, like a report. It could be a presentation or a social media post based on their work. Oh, Tara, I think you're on mute.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, someone's going to do that at least once in a presentation, right? So these are the typical co-op job titles that we often see in our co-op portal. So we're starting first to look at some of the roles that business students do, and then also some of the roles that engineering and computer science students do. And of course, this is not a comprehensive list. This is just really a snapshot. So one thing that we did want to mention, though, like for smaller companies hiring a student, it's really common that the student is going to do a lot of different things in the role. They're not tied into just doing accounting or just being an event planner. They might do both in your company, depending on the size of your company and what your business needs are. For engineering and computer science students, their jobs need to be really related to their degree and technical in nature in order to meet accreditation standards for the faculty. So, and especially with our engineering students, where they do 4 work terms as part of their degree, it's super important when they're graduating that their work terms have been related to their job. So we also at UVic have quite a few optional programs. And so what that means is these are students where co-op is not mandatory for them and they have to apply and opt into the program. And this includes students in law, students in fine arts, our science students. So there's really quite a wide range of students in what they can do. Even our kinesiology students can do co-op, and often many do. So this is, again, just to broaden your awareness of the type of jobs that co-op students can do. So over to you, Christine.
Thank you. Let's dive into the details of the hiring process. First, you want to connect with us. You can connect with any of us or all of us. If we mutually determine hiring a student is a good fit for the position, then the next step is to create a position. If you don't have a job description, we can help you. We can help you explore if you're eligible for funding and make recommendation on funding partners that you could apply to. We'll also help to ensure that your job posting meets the requirement of funding partners to give you the best chance at being successful. Next, you'll post the position. Once your job posting is ready, we can post it on our job portal for eligible students to view and apply. The ideal time to post varies by the program, but there's almost always a sweet spot 2 to 3 months before each semester term where the most students are actively job seeking. That said, you can post almost any time and still get an excellent student because everyone engages in their job search at different times. So if you're not sure about timing, just ask. We encourage you to post across a variety of programs across here at UVic to cast your net as wide as possible. We can collect student applications and send them to you, or ask that students apply directly to your email or website. You'll then review applications. After you receive your applications, our office are available to help you set up interviews if you like. If we're here to help with as much HR support as you need, and it really just comes down to your preference. These services are available to you at no cost, and you have no obligation to hire a student at the end. The final step is to hire a student. If you find the right candidate, make the job offer, hiring a student as you would any other temporary employee. We can also do this on your behalf. We ultimately just need to know who it is you've chosen to hire so we can register them on our end. Co-ops are a registered academic experience that are listed on students' transcripts. Here we have UVic biology student Paige Garrett on her work term with Dan Veterinary Clinic. And if you're curious to look and learn more, you can click on that QR code. Thank you.
Oh,
So
Morgan,
how
it's
to
your turn to be
Okay.
muted.
How to get students interested in your posting. Be sure to explicitly include details in your posting and don't just assume that the students will know. Choose descriptive position titles, not just co-op student, and help the students see themselves in the position versus just like a long list of qualifications. Provide information about your company and don't assume that they already know. As we know as well, these are students that are applying for positions. Sometimes it's maybe their first time applying in a job market like this. Explain how the position fits into the overall work of your business and include information on flexible work arrangements if that's applicable to your company. Use inclusive language, which we do have a handout and resources created through our EDI group, if you do need those. Any other included unique benefits or activities for your team. You want to make your company and your company culture sound welcoming to the students. And any other perks that may interest them with their time with your company would also be good to be included. So Christine briefly touched upon these points earlier, but we wanted to reiterate. Moving quickly through the hiring process is important, shortlisting and interviewing. Some hiring managers wait a little bit too long to move through this process and will often lose their top candidates. Utilize administrative support from our co-op office, such as briefly talked about before, but scheduling interviews or helping to send out job offers. Hiring does happen very quickly, and we will help you navigate that, especially if the students are facing a multi-offer situation. This usually occurs during our peak periods, where students are applying for multiple positions. Did you have any further? So before we kind of move on to the next topic, if there were any questions about our hiring process, we're happy to answer those now for you. No, okay. So this is our third testimonial here. This is a UVic biomedical engineering student working for the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. So now we're going to be segueing into funding and why some of you may be here today. You've identified a need in your organization, and hiring a student will cost you some money, but there are funding opportunities that you may be able to take advantage of to help you to supplement the student's salary. This program is part of the Youth Employment Strategy at Employment and Social Development Canada. It's been around for a long time, and it's to support non-for-profits, the public sector, and private sector employers with less than 50 full-time employed staff. Similar to SWPP, funds are restricted to students who are Canadian citizens, permanent residents, or those with refugee status and a valid SIN number between the ages of 15 and 30. Typically, this is a 12-week minimum full-time placement and the coverage of 75% of labor costs. Funding is restricted to only the summer terms. The earliest start will be in April, the latest start will be in July, and the latest end date can be in September. It must be 30 hours a week or more for at least 6 weeks, only up to 16 weeks. But the expected average from Service Canada is that a quality position will offer an average of 35 hours a week for 8 weeks. You'll be notified if you are approved typically by the last week of April or early May, and once you've received approval, you can post your position with UVic and Camosun. It also gets posted on the Canadian Job Bank, so all youth nationally can see your posting. Please note that job activities cannot begin prior to receiving approval for funding. For this particular program, timing is very important. Pre-planning is required for the funding program. All of the program is offered for summer hiring, and the application process used to begin right before Christmas, long before you were even thinking about the following summer. This past year, the applications did open up in November 23rd and closed on January 10th. Please check the Canadian Summer Jobs website for this year's application deadlines in case they make further changes to the program. We recommend you develop your application early and get it ready to submit so you don't miss the application deadline. Note that a full and detailed application guide is available on the CSJ website and available for download as well. Things that you'll need for your application are a mentorship plan, a budget demonstrating a need for 75% of wage coverages. You'll submit that through their portal in December, if possible, or early January, and it will be screened by CSJ, and then the Economic and Social Development Canada will also screen that based on the federal priorities, which include supporting sport, tourism, essential services, and then it rolls through to our local MPs who will then screen further based on their priorities. After the student's last day of work, you'll submit a payment claim. The latest date to submit is 30 days after the student's last day of work.
Terrific, thank you. Now from the summer job program to funding that's available throughout the year and all the terms. The Student Work Placement Program, or SWPP, is a federal government funding program that provides grants to co-op employers in the form of a wage subsidy for work-integrated learning placements. The program has 18 funding partners, as Dave mentioned, who delivers these grants on behalf of the federal government. These funding partners provide up to 50% of the student's wage to a maximum of $5,000 or 70% to a maximum of $7,000. The 70% applies to employers who hire students from underrepresented groups, which include female STEM students, first-year students, Indigenous students, students with a disability, visible minorities, and newcomers to Canada. This is an interaction that takes place between the student and the funding partner. If the student does identify to the funder that they belong to one of these underrepresented groups, then the funder would award the higher amount to the employer. Please note that these funds are paid to the employer up to 60 days after the student completes their work term. So you need to have enough funds to cover the student's salary for the entirety of the work term. Please note that funding is competitive and is often first come, first served. So you should apply early, as soon as the student is hired, and before they start.
So as Christine mentioned, and Dave mentioned earlier too, there are 18 different SWPP funding partners, and they deliver the funding on behalf of the federal government. Many of them are sector-based. There are common eligibility criteria that Dave is going to talk about in a little more detail that apply to all of the funding partners. That has been established by the federal government. And then each funding partner has some real specific differences based on the sector that they are representing. So if you're not sure who to apply to, just check with one of us. We'd be happy to point you in the right direction. Some of the funding partners are very niche and smaller, like the manufacturing funder, Excellence in Manufacturing Consortium. They would have a smaller pot of money to give out, but they're very niche. So they're looking for companies who are in the manufacturing sector. Sometimes you can have better luck with the niche funding partners as opposed to the bigger ones where there's a lot of competition, like the Talent Opportunities Program, which is administered by the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. They do provide funding for employers across Canada, not just in Ontario, but they are not sector specific. So you can be from any industry or business and you will qualify under their guidelines. So we can help you, as I mentioned, determine which funding partner might be best for you. And just like this Canada Summer Jobs Program, grants are allocated on a first come, first served basis. So the trick with being successful in applying for SWPP funding is to hire the student early so that you can apply right away. Do not wait until the student starts the job to apply. You're probably going to be too late because, again, this is a national program, so you're competing against companies from all across Canada. We do keep in communication with the funding partners, such as Dave, and we do try to keep on top of when they're opening up applications. But really, the funding partners are very good now at providing that information on their individual websites for their funding programs. So without further ado, I would like to reintroduce you to one of these funding partners, Dave Murray from ICTC, who can provide us with a snapshot of the eligibility criteria for the program, as well as further details about the funding process. Hopefully that will help you in your applications.
I had to remember to turn my mic on. Thanks, Tara. Could you go back to the funding partner screen just for a quick moment? Thank you. One of the things I'd like to mention is as employers, it's really important. You're going to look at this list and go, I have no idea who to contact, who to talk to. Some may be obvious for your businesses, some may not be obvious when you look at them. So it's really important to work with your employer development office at the post-secondary school. We work with them to keep them aware and apprised of what's going on. All of us have the same fundamental rules that we've talked about here in terms of the level of the funding and the eligibility requirements, but we all have slightly different intake processes or different bells and whistles that we offer for our particular employer community. In my case, information and communication technology space, we actually have a very broad definition. So you don't need to be an IT-based company to get funding from my organization. We look at the role you're hiring for. And as long as that role is tech-enabled, which simply put means that student needs to be touching a computer for part of their job, we can find a way to subsidize that position for you from a role perspective. Thanks, Tara. If you can move on to the next slide, we can go on to some of the details. So from an eligibility perspective, we have to look at it both from the employer as well as the student. So from an employer perspective, you can be either a for-profit or a not-for-profit agency. There are some businesses that you cannot be, though. You cannot be any of the 3 levels of government, so federal, provincial, or municipal, because we're a federally funded program. That would be sort of a circular funding routine. There is a 4th level of government that you can be eligible for, and that is a First Nation government. They are not excluded from this funding solution. So if you're part of a First Nation community and you'd like to hire students into that organization, funding is available for you. Some of the other business exclusions are crown corporations, as well as banks or financial institutions. And lastly, post-secondaries cannot hire their own students. So sorry, Tara and Karima et al. We can't subsidize you to hire students. That leaves the funding available for all the other employers, though. You can't receive other federal funding to hire a student. So as a federal program, we need to make sure that you're not double dipping with other programs. So if you look at that prior list of other SWPP providers, you can get funding from me, but you can't top it up from TechNation or the Electricity Human Resources Council. If you can find provincial funding or private or municipal funding to support you hiring a student, you can top that student's salary up to 100% of their salary for the term. So we can fund you combined with a top up from a provincial, municipal, or private source. You must hire students as employees, not as independent contractors. So this, I know with some very small startups, that can be an issue, but you do need to have some form of payroll system and be able to pay your students on a regular basis. We do need those pay stubs as proof of employment at the end of the term. And then lastly, there are some sector-specific criteria that are established by each individual funding partner. As I said, the basics are the same, but some funding partners will have different rules of engagement. Now, as far as the students go, the students do need to have Canadian citizenship, permanent residency, or be a registered refugee under an IRCC program here in Canada. Effectively, that means international students that are here under a student permit are ineligible for funding. They are available for co-op placements and work placements through the school. It's just from a funding perspective, none of these federal programs will provide funds for them. The students do need to be in a registered post-secondary program. Now, UVic is an obvious choice in this case. However, the students can come from a community college, a polytechnic, or a fully functioning university. There are some limitations for schools. If you have questions, please send me an email, and I'm more than happy to see if you want to go to another school besides the wonderful University of Victoria. For the purpose of this conversation today, I can't imagine why you would do that, though. The other interesting point is the students have to be registered. So they have to have at least 1 4-month term behind them, and they cannot yet be eligible to graduate. So those are sort of the 2 bookends in terms of where they have to be. We do ask for proof of enrollment. So we'll need a letter from either the co-op service department that shows they're taking a co-op course, or from the registrar, or even an unofficial transcript that shows their current standing. This should go without saying, they do have to be legally able to work in Canada. And they also cannot be a family member of the employer. So this is avoiding nepotism issues. Some other relatively should seem like minor eligibility issues. As an employer, you do need to have general liability insurance. This is, in many cases, a holdover from when all positions are in office in bricks and mortar facilities. GLI deals with sort of slips, trips, and falls, but it is a requirement of the program that you do have it. So even if you are a fully virtual operation, you still need to have general liability insurance. Lastly, you also need the financial capacity to pay the student up front, because the way our process works, the way all SWIP funders work, is you pay the student and then submit pay stubs to us at the end of their work term, and then you'll receive the funding in a refund after that. It can take 4 to 6 weeks after you submit the pay stubs to us. I think are those the highlights for this slide? Yeah, I think so. So as I mentioned, the process varies by funding partner, and this is where things can be challenging for you as an employer. If you just get a list and websites for 18 providers and go, here, figure it out, it's tough. As I said, the basic rules are all the same, but the bells and whistles are different, as well as the individual cadence for everyone. Some common things, though, are we all have an online application process. So we all have some form of portal that you have to submit your information to. Each subsidy provider has different levels of human support. Sometimes you'll just get an email. In my case, it could be an email. I'll top that up with a phone call if you have questions, to try to make sure the process is as simple as possible. You do have to have a CRA business number, as well as a local provincial number if you're registered provincially. You need to provide a job description and identify the hiring term and submit the application for each student. Now, in terms of timing, I can't remember if it was Tara or Christine mentioned beforehand, submit your application as soon as you can. So in our case, for next summer, we will likely be opening our portal for applications mid-February. So you can start your application process as soon as our portal opens. However, we can't finish processing the application until you've hired the student, because we need information from both you and the student both. And that's the details around the particular student, not just the generic concept of a student. And that's because that student will provide their proof of enrollment, and they will also provide their self-declaration if they fall into an underrepresented category. So we can't complete that until you have your students. So we'll hold a placeholder in our waiting list if you have just started the process, but it does not guarantee funding until you've hired the student and worked through the full eligibility process with us. So very briefly, let me talk about what that process looks like. So you'll go into our web portal, you'll start the application process, you'll get a registration number from us. You will provide details of the job description, you'll provide details of your company, you'll provide the identification of the student. Once we have their email and name, we will send them an email automated through our system asking for their information. When they have that information, that will come back. We'll take a look at both the employer information and the student information. We'll do a review. That typically takes 5 to 10 business days after we have both pieces of information. And then we'll let you know if you're accepted or not. If you're accepted, the next thing you will need to do is we will issue a contract to you that will define your mutual rights and obligations for that funding process. Because this is a fiscal arrangement, we have to have it contracted. Until that contract is signed, your funding is not in place. That contract is a very important document to have. It's a simple document, but it's an important one. Once the contract is in place, what we ask is during the first 2 weeks of that work term, you develop a learning plan with the student. And what we're looking for, this may be slightly different than what the co-op department requires, but what we're looking for are 3 technical skills that you're going to have the student focus on and learn through the work placement. So we're looking for an identification of what the skill is. We're looking for how they're going to do it and how you're going to support them with it. We're not looking for a detailed description. It can be very brief, but it has to cover those 3 things for 3 technical skills. Once that learning plan is in place, you can get back to doing your day job and working with the student. We'll check in about 2 months when we'll ask you to complete a midterm check-in, both you and the student. That is a very brief checkpoint document just to make sure things are working as expected. It's anonymous. The student will not see your comments and you will not see the student's comments, but we do see both. Then at the end of the term, within the last 2 weeks of the term, we ask you to complete a final evaluation, a little more comprehensive, not much. It may take 15 minutes instead of 5. But we are looking for a little more detail. And again, same anonymity applies. That's a hard word for me today. Once the term ends, we ask you to submit the first and last pay stubs for the students to us, again, through that portal, within 2 weeks of the end of the work placement, and then we'll process that payment, and you should get it 4 to 6 weeks after. That's sort of the highlights of the process. As I said, each employer, or sorry, each funding partner may have a slightly different cadence. We'll open our windows at different times. We'll have slightly different application processes. So it is important to make sure you keep in touch with your employer development officer at the school. They'll be best positioned to answer your questions. If not, reach out to the funders that you're looking for support. From an ICTC perspective, I'll put my contact information in the chat. I would love to see what I can do to help you receive funding. One other thing I did want to mention very briefly is I did mention that you can't stack with other federal funding, but you can with provincial or private funding. The other point is, if you want to hire a student for more than a single 4-month placement, we have the ability to do that. So if you want to hire a student for 8 months, 12 months, even up to 16 months of consecutive work placements, we can provide funding as long as the funding is available. You just need to submit a new application for each 4-month block.
That's great. Thanks, Dave. Do you want to speak to like employers who hire more than one student at a time?
Thanks, Tara. That's a great point. I think I stepped over that one. So the language is sometimes confusing. You are able to hire more than one student. I think Christine mentioned the funding is first come, first served from our pool of funding, from all funders' pools. Once our money is gone, it's gone. So we can't go above that. But if you are interested in hiring more than one student, we have a lot of employers. I have some that hire 25 students per term. They're definitely on the larger size. So we can work with you to fund that. You have to submit an application for each student individually. So there is more work involved, but we do try to help streamline it as much as possible if you are hiring a lot of students like that. And if that's your situation, definitely reach out to me. I'd love to see what we can do to work out a solution that helps you balance your needs with our processes.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. And I just wanted to add, like during COVID, when everything fell apart and the SWPP program actually did allow for a short period of time post-secondary students to apply for funding. And we did. We hired a student under the program. And when you speak out what all the steps are, it sounds like a lot of work, but the process was actually very, very streamlined and not very, I think our application took 30 minutes to create. And then the follow-ups were pretty straightforward. It wasn't onerous. And so I think the SWPP program has done a really good job at making things streamlined for employers.
Yeah, maybe I could just add on to that, Tara. That's a good point. I mean, hopefully we don't see those dark days of COVID again. But we did work with the federal government to pivot because we knew a lot of students needed their work placements to graduate on a reasonable schedule. So we did work with the schools to find solutions at that point. We've definitely proven out that we will adapt through this programming to meet the current economic needs of the situation. But the point I wanted to add to Tara's point about the simplicity of the process is, at most, the funding is $7,000. That can be the difference for you as an employer to hire or not hire. That can be a deciding factor for you. But from a business perspective, it's also not a ton of money. So I really strive, and as do all of the SWPP providers, strive to make sure that your return on investment, the amount of effort you have to put in place to get that level of funding, is aligned with the size of the prize. And we really want to do that. We're not perfect yet, but we keep striving to do it a little bit better every year. So that it may look scary the first time you go through the process, but it's easy once you get over that lack of familiarity the first time through. And we have
Yeah.
people around to help you through it.
Yeah, very good. Thanks so much, Dave. Morgan, over to you.
All right. So if your position is dependent on funding, the student is taking a gamble that your application will be approved before or after they are been hired. Therefore, it's important to note on the posting so that students are aware that when applying, the position potentially may not materialize depending on the results of your funding application. As mentioned earlier, if you are using a federal funding program, the students must be hired as an employee. Students are treated like any other employee in your company except for the fact that they work for a short period of time. As a temporary employee, you will deduct EI, CPP, and WCB from the student's pay. Since students are working for a short period of time with you, they don't receive a vacation, but they do receive 4% in lieu of the vacation pay. Once you have been approved for funding, there may be additional requirements, typically recording pieces, separate from the school's work term deliverables. Because this is a federal program, the funding partners are accountable to the government for the money that they disperse. The reporting pieces help to create accountability for how the grants are used. For example, you may be asked to create a lesson plan identifying the things that the students will learn while working for you, participate in a midterm check-in, or complete a survey at the end of the work term. So in this photo is a commerce student, Lauren McDermott. She completed a work term in Southeast Asia at the Asian Ministry of Education and Organization Regional Training Center in Vietnam. For students, cooperative education lets them try out career options and gain valuable paid work experience. 56% of UVic students take part in the co-op work terms and graduate with work experience in their field. More than half of the students who take part in co-op receive a job offer before they graduate, and many of these positions are with their former co-op employers. For employers, they benefit from the passionate, hardworking students that help them complete the projects, bring innovation into their business. And with employers facing labor challenges and difficulty in filling these positions, co-op students might help you find your next full-time employee. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat or raise your hand, and we're happy to answer for you.
All right, we'll look for questions. Thank you. And there'll be, if you can put your questions in the Q&A or let's see if we have any questions there. I can also invite you to raise your hands. We can look there as well.
I have a question, if I may. More from a student perspective, I noticed in the SWPP program that a student does not necessarily have to be a co-op student or registered in a WIL program. They only need to be registered at the university as a full-time student. Is that correct, or did I misread that?
Can I answer that?
Please.
So it will really depend on program by program. Some of the funders, I think, do require that the students are in a registered co-op program. Our funding does not require that. It does make it easier if the student is in a curricular co-op program because they're part of a co-op course. So it's easy for them to provide proof of enrollment. However, if you're just interested in hiring I'm going to refer to them as a regular streamed student, someone who's going to school 8 months and then having a typical summer off. If you want to hire them through that, we can provide funding for that. In our case, the rule does need to be tech enabled. You do need to follow all of the other eligibility processes, but the funding can follow that. They do need to also provide proof of enrollment for their situation. So because they're in a regular program, we do understand that they may have finished school in the spring and they're not registering, say, until July or August at the time that you're applying. So that's where we work with an unofficial transcript or some other means, but they have to have some way of providing proof of enrollment. But the funding is available for any student. I should add as well, from a student perspective, we don't need to assume that the students are undergraduate students working on a bachelor's degree. They could be part of a larger continuing education program. They could be working on a certificate or a diploma. They could be working on their master's or even their PhD or doing postdoctoral work. There's no age limit for our funding, which is also a phenomenal solution. So if you have a brilliant student who's starting their first work placement at 17 years old, that's great. We can provide funding for them. If they're working on their third PhD and you want to bring them in and they're in their 60s, we can provide funding for that opportunity as well. So a lot of flexibility with this when you're looking at hiring students.
Thank you. That's very informative.